Hello everyone, here we are again with Soulbound Studios, talking to you today about settlements. I'm Jeremy Caspian Walsh, owner and creative director of Soulbound Studios, and I'm going to be joined today by Vi Bridwell, our senior producer, and Jason Death Welter, our UI, UX, and experiences designer, web designer as well. So we're going to talk about settlements today. Following our typical format, we have a Reddit thread where people have had an opportunity to post their questions that they have around settlements and related mechanics, and then have been upvoted by you, the community, so that we know what your biggest questions and concerns are. So we have Keltori here off screen. She's going to be reading the questions that you guys have posted, and then we will do our best to answer them. Keltori set a mug on our table here. You can see that Helgrim sent us a mug. We made a commitment. It wasn't actually intentional, but I sort of last time we did a Q&A commented on how people just keep sending us mugs, and so every time we do one of these Q&As, we're gonna have a different mug on screen, and I didn't mean it, but it's happened. So thank you to Helgrim for sending us a custom mug with their logo on it. Much appreciated. If you're in the community and you send us mugs and stuff like that, we will absolutely show them on screen. So thank you to those guys. Let's go ahead and get started talking about settlements. We've got a number of design journals already that are up there that talk about what the settlements are, how they work, but there's still some questions and confusion. So let's do the best we can to put your minds at ease and answer your questions. The purpose of settlements is one of those things that fills kind of a similar role as guilds would fill in other games. So it's an opportunity for people to come together and create a small society. They've got anywhere from 3 parcels of land to significantly larger than that, 25, 30, 40, who knows. And so it's really all about getting players together and NPCs to kind of work towards establishing something that's their contribution to the world. And it's all about the safety and stability of that environment. And so, whether it's PC or NPC, it's really about everybody collaborating together. The mechanic plays very much like an RTS. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure, as we get into other people's questions. But the idea is that, everybody inside of that is contributing towards the resources that the settlement has, as well as what you're constructing and why, and what your goals and motivations are. The NPCs are first going to be going around trying to make sure they have food and shelter and water and all those things. Then they're going to try and make sure that they're safe and they have no immediate threats. They're going to try and make sure they have revenue for their family. They're going to try and make sure that they have a place that they fit into society, and then ultimately they'll start fighting for their religious and personal ideals and things like that. So you'll have to convince them to do the things that you want them to do. They're not just like radial menu, send over to go gather resources. You'll have to engage with them, you'll have to ask them, and based on their personality, we do use the Big 5 personality theory, Big 5 traits. So openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, apathy, and neuroticism. And depending upon the personality of the NPC, they might require that you do some things for them in exchange first, or they might just tell you to piss off and be wholly unagreeable the entire time. And that's what makes it exciting. They're just like actual players. What normally drives people from one location to another location? In almost all cases, it's going to be the discovery of new things, like new rare minerals and resources, or more importantly, it's going to be the presence of jobs. I mentioned the hierarchical needs before. If you're in a settlement and you're building things, you build houses, you create businesses and things like that, and you spread the word through billboard posts and other things like that, NPCs will learn about the jobs that are available inside your settlement, and if they're looking for work, will migrate to your settlement.
Certainly there's going to be some civilizations that are going to have more abundant resources at first, and those settlements are probably going to see an influx of population, both PCs and NPCs initially. It's really going to be about creating opportunity, and both PCs and NPCs alike will be drawn by that.
I think the plan right now too is to treat the settlements the same way we treat our other organizations and players, in the sense that there will be a reputation and fame system associated with the settlements as well. So a hamlet, for example, will have almost no reputation and fame. A village will have slightly more, but once you start getting to the towns and cities, the reputation and fame of that will spread much more quickly. So as people, NPCs and players, move around in the world, they can mention, hey, I just came from this magnificent city of whatever it was, or this magnificent town of etc. And when that happens, it'll spread the reputation and fame of those, so then NPCs are more likely to want to go and check it out and stuff like that.
You want someone to leave, you raise the taxes. So if, let's say you have blacksmiths in your town, and you had all your job postings, and then you amassed your armory, and you no longer need them, and you want to try and fill the area with people to produce food, and you want farmers in, you just hike the taxes on producing, like armory equipment. And most likely those people making those will not be making money anymore, and they'll just leave your town.
Or you could go to war and hope that they don't come back from it.
Wow. We've already established that there are port cities and docks and harbors and things like that, but they're generally reserved for river travel or sea travel. So they're not ocean travel, but larger inland seas, like the Gulf of Mexico type environment, there definitely could be like port cities for that. So there will be sea trade as well as river trade, but you won't find settlements necessarily on the edges of the continent, primarily because at that point, unless they've got a river running by them, it's mostly going to be saltwater and brackish water near there, and all of our settlements ultimately need a place where they can get a water source.
We wanted to make it so like you'd be able to build a building, make additions to the room, and expand it.
I think the general idea is that we want to continue to use the architecture tool. So you might have something like a room blueprint, which is just an individual room that you could add on. And so you would take the blueprint, use it to place an expanded foundation on the edge of your current house, or an extra room, an overhang off the edge of the second floor or something like that. And that would put the kind of basic structure in place. And then you'd have to go ahead and build the components and materials like you normally would in order to add the walls and other things like that. And when people begin and they enter into Exposition, what they're ultimately doing is trying to get the game world up to the point where launch is available. But when players come into launch, what they should encounter are settlements that feel like they've been there for hundreds or thousands of years. Really what people in Exposition are doing is they're contributing to the history of the world. They're taking over, an ancient family that's been in that region for many generations. A lot of the infrastructure for these settlements are going to be there already. They're going to happen as part of our pre-done generation to make sure that it makes sense that that settlement would have survived for hundreds of thousands of years, because if that infrastructure is not there, it'll be pretty obvious that the settlement hasn't been there, but more likely it'll collapse shortly after players join the world because there isn't that infrastructure there. So we expect those settlements to be largely built up already.
There will be roads, there will be
Water supply,
places for people to gather, a town hall or tavern. There will be some places for commerce if it's big enough to have commerce in it. Those sorts of things will already be there.
Yep.
Yeah, settlements shouldn't be the survival game. Survival game is like out there. Settlements exist as sort of like the safe havens.
Yeah. The idea behind this is that settlements will actually, if you're talking about it from an exposition standpoint, so if you're a mayor or baron or higher and are looking to come into Exposition and build out a settlement, the settlements will actually already be placed. We're placing them because we know that they can survive there. We know the amount of resources it takes to hold the population that settlement already has, basically, at that point in time. So it's not going to be the players coming in during Exposition to a completely empty landscape with no NPCs or anything and going, I'm going to make a settlement here, and dropping in an entire settlement. It's also not going to be a lot of moving settlements around. Keep in mind that there are going to be NPCs who are already living in the world when you join, and the assumption is that other players in Exposition could also be joining as you're the mayor or baron of that settlement. And you don't want to be like, I don't think this building looks good there, I'm going to drag it over here, and without realizing you took some player's housing and just dragged it off to the edge of the settlement. So you can't just take the pre-placed buildings and move them around. That's not the way that it's supposed to work. One of the things we set up pretty early on was that NPCs will not sign your contracts. They can, however, offer their own contracts. So if there is an NPC who is, for example, a carpenter and would like to build things for the construction of your house, they will often go around offering contracts of work to do things like building, framing, or putting up siding and things like that. So at that point, you can choose to accept their contracts for the wages that they're asking, and then they will go about doing their business of building your settlements with you. If you own land, if you're one of the landowners in the village council, or if you're part of the town council because you own land in the town, then you're registered as part of the contract for that settlement. But if you're somebody who's leasing a room from somebody else who's created a tavern or an inn or something like that, then you're incognito. Nobody knows you're there.
So they'd be able to know who to collect taxes from, though, for those people who are contracted to the town.
They'd know who the owners of the building are.
Mhm.
So you could say, hey, I want to collect building, like if you're leasing the building, then the person who owns that building is leasing it from the landowner, who then knows about them, but there's no like central registrar of like all the people that are in that settlement.
Yeah, I'd imagine like tax collectors too wouldn't necessarily like look at a giant list of names and go around. They would probably walk a street, you know, be like, I'm assigned to this block this week, and knock on doors and take money.
We do expect settlements will come and go over time, but I don't think it's going to be as frequent a thing as maybe in other games. You know, once a settlement is established, aside from full siege warfare and a neighboring settlement or, you know, a neighboring county or kingdom or duchy or whatever coming in and invading, you know, we don't see those things just vanishing. You know, they're going to be pretty permanent fixtures. It's assumed that over time they've established some degree of equilibrium and that they're stable.
Yeah, largely settlements that you find when the game begins are going to be places where there are resources to support a settlement. They're going to be near some source of water. They're going to be near tillable soil if it's more of a farming community, or if it's something out in the desert and they need some rocky outcroppings to survive, then those things would be
Pulling
there.
in the tribe references now, I can tell.
I was just trying to give some variety and not just be very bland about it. So depending on the different biome that they're in, they're going to have some sort of sustainable stuff nearby to begin that settlement, and that's what you'll find. So it would be likely that they would stick around, provided that you don't drain that resource from the area.
Can you build them? Yes. Will they provide a passive or active bonus to the community? It depends on whether or not it falls into the systems that we have in place.
Yeah.
So I think you can build anything you want. I mean, the architecture tool, once released, will allow you to build, you know, settlements or buildings really as large as you have the resources and energy and time to do. From an architecture standpoint, I don't know about pyramids yet. That's one of the things that we've talked about. Square, rectangular, you know, those types of things, traditional kind of European style homes, you know, even like South American, Mesoamerican type stuff, like those are all fairly well understood from an architecture standpoint. But once you start getting into non-rectangular things like pyramids or dome-based or kind of other things, there's some work that needs to be done still, because our system is ultimately physically accurate, or it's designed to be. So if you take out the supports for a building, it will collapse, and that's different with a pyramid.
I think the call to action kind of stuff is pretty easy, because like, you know, Fires of Gondor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd have some object that you could use to trigger an event. NPCs
city bells or something like that.
Yeah, city bells, trumpets blaring or something like that, and they could be different per region and per culture. And just have some method of conveying messages to large numbers of people. You know, PCs will have to learn what those cues are and act accordingly. NPCs will probably have some innate nature built into them that will react to those. So, you know, warning flags go up. Certain NPCs will go to guard post. Other NPCs will cower in their homes.
Yes, that came with the digging and tunneling system. So,
Could you make a settlement underground under another settlement owned by someone else?
unlikely, because the water table would drown you. Whether or not you're talking about vehicles like wagons or ships or bridges or really anything that is larger than something you can hold will typically require you to construct a blueprint and then place the blueprint where you want the structure to be created and then go from there. But yes. I think ultimately it comes down to your play style. It depends on what you're looking for. If you want to play a character who is, you know, woken up at various hours of the day, called to arms to defend the nearby settlement, or, you know, has training exercises or something like that. For example, if you want to build a champion character or an explorer character that has skills in the combat tree, then going out to a settlement like that will likely have passive bonuses to your ability to train in those skills. So you'll train in combat skills faster when in the vicinity of a stronghold or a fort or something like that than you would near a commercial district. The corollary is also true, which is certain skills related to commerce or trade or other things advance more in non-military based on the buildings that are there. Colosseums, I don't know. That would be something probably at a Duke tier or higher in terms of like what we would expect somebody to place. I don't think we would really expect a count or a mayor to be like, I would like my town to have a Colosseum. Boom. But maybe some of the higher level tiers. In terms of religious buildings and other things like that, interesting buildings, I think so. I think we would definitely like to have that.
What Linnaeus might be getting at, if I read between the lines a little bit, is setting up the identity of your town.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly you're going to want to be known as maybe the town where people go for gladiator combat versus if you're the merchant capital of the world sort of thing. So that's kind of what I sensed from that question. And so will we provide enough variety of items in the EP store during Exposition that people can place that they'll really be able to create these towns that are known for something?
I think the goal is yes, but I think part of that's also going to be about choosing where the settlement is. Because I think if you choose a settlement out of in the middle of the desert, for example, an arid, a semi-arid desert, and you're like, I'm going to create a trade hub, and it's off on the edge of the map where nobody's ever going to go, then it probably wouldn't work there. So I think that to the degree that the environment and the biome and the culture of the tribe that you choose allows you to customize in that way, then we definitely want to do that. I mean, that's the whole point of the EP store, is to give you the things that allow you to create that thing the way you want it. Whether or not you're gentry, aristocracy, or nobility, the items in the EP store are really about customizing your idea for that region. So I think if we're reading between the lines, the goal is yes, that people will be able to customize, but not all of customizing the settlement will come solely from the EP, but I think also from which settlements they select. I think that's still the plan. I mean, that's one of the main things for the outer baronies, or if you have a central duchy and you want to build up a larger keep, then building the blueprints for those and the kind of all the cool corridors and hallways and things like that, the parapeces and breezeways and overhangs. And I'll be honest, when I was a kid, I used to get graph paper and just draw out all the cool things I would do if I had a hidden castle.
Hidden castle?
Well, no, hidden castle with hidden chambers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I would like to be able to do that for people as well. So
I also did that.
I think everybody did that. I think that's just kind of a thing you do in childhood. Even my kids do that.
I super want some sort of house that has secret passages.
Yeah.
I really
and now,
want that.
well, I was going to say now we can, but now we can actually have things hidden inside of things, because we passed the dig and bury stretch goal. So.
Well, we're putting it in.
We're putting it in. We didn't pass
even though the stretch goals were retired when we hit the 2 million.
Because we're really nice that way.
We like you guys.
And it's just really cool.
Yes.
I assume so. Yes. So schools, like all the buildings, what defines a building and the passive and active bonuses are the things that you have on the inside of it. Because really space is just space, but when you zone off a room and put stuff in it, then that defines what the passive and active bonuses are that building gives you. So a school is one that has, there can be different types of schools, but more than anything, it's like workstations and desks and stuff like that. So if you get a space that's a certain size and you put desks and stuff in it, then you get the passive bonuses towards education and stuff like that. Yes, they should be autonomous enough to be able to do those things, because if they're going to have needs and their need is a place to live, then they're going to try and do what they can to either rent or lease a place to live, and if they amass enough wealth that they can afford land, then they will attempt to purchase the land that they can then build a house on. So
yeah, this goes back to the first question. What will draw people to your land, and that will be some opportunity, and that includes NPCs who will want to take advantage of that by living there.
Yeah.
That's why also taking land, buying it, building structures on it, and then offering that for sale or lease will also attract NPCs, those that don't have the wealth to buy the land and do that stuff for you, because they can come and work for you, but they couldn't build the building themselves. So this just is a way to increase the number. But if you just have the land available, then you might get some of the wealthier NPCs that actually can afford to come and buy the land. The main ways are going to be through political means. So there's the ceticism that happens every 16 years, in which the nobles of all the different kingdoms and duchies and counties come together and they agree upon the borders of the different regions. And if they agree, then life is good and everybody goes on. If they disagree, if for whatever reason there is a claim made towards something that another person disagrees with, then they have to kind of work through the politics of that. And there will be more details coming on that at some point in the future. The other way, of course, is to just say that region that you own, that's mine now. And then you need to cast a spell eye for that. You need a reason to go to war for it, and then you basically invade. And depending upon how the war goes, either you can take that region in full, or you can agree to take a portion of it, basically sue for peace and get the borders redrawn for that region. And that's really the only way to change the borders of domains. Obviously, you can take over land by doing a either adverse possession or buying the land from somebody, but all that does is give the owner changes who the owner of that land is, not which domain that land still belongs to. Even if you're the king, if I'm the king and I use adverse possession to take over a piece of land on the border of my kingdom, I'm now just a king who also happens to own land in the nearby kingdom. It doesn't make that land part of my kingdom, if that makes sense.
What if there's like a natural disaster and a river changes course and that river was the border before? Would that impact that?
No. There was a mention in a previous Q&A about trees along the border, and we had explicitly said that that did not expand the boundary of the kingdom or of your domain. All it did is potentially provide cover if you wanted to sneak over the border and have the cover of trees there.
Right, you put your army that much closer if they can't see you coming.
Right.
Oh yeah, they can migrate if there's a need to do so. I mean, setting roots in an area often does provide a stronger tie to that region, but I mean, at some point you're going to have more family members than maybe that town can have, and maybe part of it will move off, or maybe the entire thing will if the opportunities dry up.
As the settlement owner, whether you're the mayor or baron in some cases, there will be land that you own that is currently set up. It might have storefronts and other things, so you'll have more control over those than just like the residential areas. So there will be some customization. There will also be areas where there's just no buildings yet, but land that you still own that you can then customize and put whatever kind of building you want there. You can also expand the size of the settlement and do things along the border. I don't know that there is an average. You can think about the size of a settlement. Based on the numbers we had provided before, you've got a hamlet, it's like 3 parcels of land and at least, I think, 9 people, and then it goes out from there, so it creates a larger radius, so you eventually get to like 9 parcels of land and then 25 parcels of land, and it kind of continues to go out from there. We're working on those numbers right now to try and balance them, but the idea is that they'll become denser and denser. So really, the size of the barony is going to be a big part of that, and then how much of that barony is going to be soldiers and people who are there to train versus people who are there to do the farming and other things that the barony still needs in order to survive. So it's going to vary wildly by the size of the barony and also just what the population density in that region is. So if you're a military settlement on the edge of a well-known, peaceful, neighboring barony, like, you don't really have a reason to reinforce it a lot. If you're on the edge of the duchy and the nearby duchy is known to be hostile and prone to skirmishes and invasions, then maybe you're going to have more reinforcements. If we are going to add a system of making it so that people can't trespass, it would probably be by the placement of like no trespassing signs. So you place up no trespassing signs, and then walking into radius of a no trespassing sign is actually a violation of that implicit contract. You've said, don't walk here, and now you're walking here. So in the absence of those, if it's just open land with no visual indications that that's the edge of a parcel of land or a region or something like that, then we wouldn't do that. Walking into a town is a little bit different because towns can actually have bylaws, so they can make sure that things are and are not legal within the boundaries of their towns. So those, you kind of just have to know you're walking into a town, but it should be pretty obvious because there'll be structures in front of you. You could build a castle, for example, at any settlement size if you have the resources to do so and the manpower to build it. But if there were a passive bonus or active bonus associated with being a castle, then if there was a requirement that a settlement be a certain size for you to get that, then you wouldn't get it until you become a settlement of that size. So it's important to note that there will be some buildings which are requirements for moving up in terms of settlement size, and then there are some buildings that you don't get the bonuses until you are a settlement of a specific size. If you've got a castle, can you throw the large banners off the edge of the wall so that you've got your sigil or your coat of arms hanging off the side of the wall? And those are things that will have attach points and stuff like that. It allows you to kind of put those decorations up, as well as just putting stands up that has your banner hanging off of them. Yes. Presumably the AI is smart enough to know how to maintain their own settlement. If I'm successful, then they will be able to. Public places, yes. They're built by anybody in the settlement who wants to build them, assuming that that's been zoned to be built there, or it can be built by the people who own that plot of land. There are passive and active bonuses potentially to those public places. One of them is the beer garden you've been seeing, which has its own benefits. I'll leave it up to you to figure out what the active and passive bonuses of a beer garden are. Right now, the way the system works is when you pick your starting settlement, whether or not you're a mayor or a count or duke, when you pick your kind of home settlement and the family that you're a part of, that is the seat of your governing as well as where you grew up. When you lay down the foundation for a structure, it will tell you whether or not you can do it, and unlike other games, if it's close, it will actually bring the terrain up to match the flatness of the foundation. Like, you'll get extra foundation there. So in most cases, you're not going to have to care about the elevation. There might be some way in the future through research and technology to do such, but that's not going to be available at launch.
Would you know if you built a castle there, if it would fall over and sink into the swamp?
No. You would have to know that swamps are a bad place to build castles. Plus, there's not going to be any resources around to build a castle because it's a swamp. So you'd have to bring the stone in, and that should be a good sign that stone probably doesn't belong there. So the way the road system works is actually, as you walk around in places, it will take whatever the grass or the wheat or whatever is there, and it starts to flatten it out, and then eventually it just wears a path there. And then you can go through and you can lay down tile or stone or other things in order to make that an actual road, which is important because the rate at which you move in the world is a function of the terrain you're moving on. So if you're moving through mud or snow or something like that, it is harder to get around than if you're just moving over a cobblestone road or a stone road or something like that. An area that's not inside of a settlement is not owned by the settlement or none of the people who are in the settlement, so it's up to the count to negotiate a deal to make sure that those resources are taken and harvested from the mine or whatever and then delivered to the settlement. We earlier gave estimates on what we would like to see in terms of the sizes and number of settlements in each of the different counties. And while those are mostly preserved, one of the things that we're keenly aware of is that not all counties are created equal. Given the size of the map and the population that we plan to have in terms of players, it's fairly quick with a little bit of math to realize that it's impossible for every single county in the world to be as populated as the numbers that we gave before. There's just not enough players in the world. And so what we anticipate is that much like in our world, there will be counties or regions that are very, very large that have a very, very sparse number of people in them, in which case that county may have one settlement or no settlements. It might just be an open range and all the count owns is a lot of land there. On the other hand, there could be much smaller counties which have almost back-to-back settlements, sprawling regions, something like the metropolitan area of Los Angeles or, San Francisco, where there's almost no distinction between one settlement and the next, other than the fact that they're politically different settlements. So we really don't know the answer to that yet. Now you're talking more about biomes and tribes.
Mm-hmm.
Underwater cities, no. Tree cities, it's very possible.
The creatures in Elyria, much like the NPCs, are going to be driven by needs, and so if they are super hungry and there's no food out in the wild and there is food in the town, they may choose to come into town. But if their normal food source is still available to them out in the wild, then they would probably prefer to stay there, because then their danger of being hunted or having interaction with people is going to be much less. But generally, the settlements are going to be built out of the resources that are available in that biome. So we had our last Q&A was about biomes, and we listed them off. And you wouldn't expect that there would be a nice wood manor house in the middle of the desert, because there's not a lot of trees there. But you would expect to see something made of stone or maybe a mud type of thing if they're able to create that. So you're going to see things that will vary depending on their look and feel based on the different types of resources that are available in the biome. And when we release some more information about the tribes in the future, then we also want to include at some point the architecture examples from that tribe and that biome that will help to reveal even further more information. The stuff that you see in the screenshots right now is based off of one area that we're working on in the prologue that is one biome, really. It's like a lower montane forest, and there are a couple different tribes that would live in that region. So not everything is going to look like that.
I'm going to take a quick opportunity. I don't know how many people who are going to come to this website, see this video, who aren't already involved in the community. But in the off chance that somebody does watch the video for the first time and they aren't familiar with what's going on, just very briefly, we are still, a year or more off from the launch of the game. But there's a lot going on in the community right now in terms of kingdom buildings and counties and duchies. There are alliances already being formed and things. So you might hear us talking about the counties and duchies and kingdoms, and inside of our Discord there are these people who hold these noble titles. If you're just joining the community, I encourage you to not just participate on the forums or join our official Discord server or anything like that, but get to know those nobles, talk to them, because chances are good they will try and bring you into a game that's already being played right now that has nothing to do with computers. It's a game of the mind. It's the dance of dynasties. It's these politickings and things that are already happening. So if you have any interest in that, I highly recommend you get involved now, because it is not too early.
Thanks for joining us today to learn about settlements, and we'll see you next time.